Welcome back to Reading Bear. Today, we will take a look at some new malicious compliance stories. And if you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comments. Let's go!
The first one is titled, I'm now in charge of shoveling whenever it snows? Alrighty then. My husband and I got into a huge fight about shoveling snow a few weeks ago, and this story most likely belongs here. Growing up, I lived in Florida and obviously never got the chance to experience snow. I've been living in a cold climate for a few years now and always liked shoveling snow. Weird, I know. Anyway, a few weeks ago it snowed a good amount and I cleared off our front walk, porch and driveway. Then it snowed for the next few days and I shoveled then too. After day 5 in a row, I was sore and sort of over shoveling, so when it snowed again, I skipped it. Husband was totally furious and told me as much. At the end of the fight, I sarcastically said that I would shovel whenever it snows no matter what, and he seemed fine with this plan. Until it started snowing in the middle of the night last week, so, at 2:54 a.m., I got out of bed and began shoveling as promised. I started right underneath our bedroom window and made sure to do a thorough job by scraping the shovel against the concrete several times. I finished the entire driveway, front walks, and both porches before coming back inside and firing up the microwave for some hot chocolate at about 3:45 a.m. Husband didn't find this funny in the slightest, and now our shovel has gone missing, lol. The next one is titled, Don't Move from the Cash Register? Okay. So a few years ago I used to work in hospitality. I worked at a cafe as a casual. Now the owners, especially looking back, were all sorts or narcissistic. Sick and can't come in? That's okay, have the rest of the week off as punishment. Want a day off? Let me make your life hell for asking. Anyways. I worked on the till, Australian here, so that's cash register. I was the only one that rarely made mistakes and knew all the products off by heart, as well as a great memory for customers' names. This is important for later, as there was only 3 people that worked alongside me besides the 2 bosses each week, as 3 would rotate our cleaning. Week 1 dishes, week 2 floors, week 3 sandwich bar. We usually started pack up around 2 p.m. and were to be out of there by 2:30 p.m. As the dishes had to be hand washed when there were no customers, I would leave the till and do some dishes, continually checking if new customers came in, and if so would stop what I was doing and greet them. Considering the rush was normally only between 12 to 1, I could get ahead of the dishes for the other girls after around 1 p.m. Well, one day the owner, who really had no idea, decided he was going to work instead of sitting on the couch. So he comes in and stuffs up about 3 orders. Now, of course, being the type of person he is, it's not his fault, and I am blasted because I need to stay at the till. When I try to explain I am there most of the time, I only leave to clear tables, etc. When I know everyone is seated and served. He goes on to say, what part of stay at the till, don't you understand? Okay, not a problem, I'll stay at the till for the next 2 weeks. I stay at the till, I don't move. Tables need clearing. I stand there. Dishes piling up. I stand there. Some days I have no customers for an hour. I stand there. Well, as the dishes start piling up and no one can get there, we start getting out later and later, sometimes 3 p.m. Sometimes later. Now remember, we are all casual, so they have to pay us. He sits on the couch and watches as the other girls run around needing my help, but I look straight back at him and stand there. After about 2 weeks they didn't like the overtime and of course said, why are we not getting out on time? We shouldn't be this late. This is where I chime in. Well, if I was able to leave the till when we have no customers lined up, I could help them. Q boss, realizing at this point it was either admit his fault or get out his wallet, he agrees and I go back to my usual role of helping the girls and getting out on time. Edited to add, I just worked out that this would have cost them approximately $1,000 extra over 2 weeks. This makes me happy. The next one is titled, A Question of Policy. First, a tiny bit of background. I lecture in health and social care. I also do consultancy and training for healthcare companies. I recently had a manager from one of my larger clients, who I had trained personally, contact me directly to help him understand a point in his company's policy he was unsure about. I explained the point in the policy and the correct way to implement it in his specific service. He thanked me for my support. I was happy to help. The end. Or so I thought. The following day I get a new operations manager from the same company. He was the manager's manager. Contact me saying I was overstepping, advising their staff and in the future to direct them to head office to clear up these sorts of queries, as I was incorrect about the interpretation of the policy. Frankly, they were rude, abrupt, and I could not get a word edgeways, and so I decided to let this little fiasco run its course, knowing exactly how it would play out. A couple hours later I get an email from one of the directors asking if I could advise one of their operations managers on how a certain policy point should be implemented. Yep, no problem. See, the thing is, I wrote that policy, which is why the manager came to me in the first place, as they knew that. I took great pleasure in calling the operations manager and telling them in extensive detail the correct way to implement the policy point, the correct interpretation, double-checking they understood everything. We went through it step by excruciating step. At the end of it all, the ops manager did apologize for the way they had spoken to me, and admitted they had been in the wrong, so it's not all bad. The next one is titled, Only Facilities Department Can Move Nameplates. I work in an office with cubicles. Each person's cube has a nameplate near the entry, as is standard in most offices. Our facilities department is officially in charge of making sure the plates are correct, ordering new ones when we hire someone new, etc. But they're not very fast at getting this stuff done. At times when there was reason for someone to relocate from one cube to another, that person would usually swap the nameplates themselves because, well, it's easy. But facilities got mad about this, so it was made official policy that only facilities could move the nameplates. Fast forward a bit, and we decided to rearrange the cubes a bit in our department. This included moving cube walls. There were enough empty cubes that we wanted to make some open spaces where people could have impromptu meetings and such. The thing is, some of the walls we needed to remove contained nameplates, some blank, some not. Remembering that we were not allowed to move those nameplates, we attached strings to the ceiling so that the nameplates would remain exactly where they were, even though there were no longer any walls for them to be mounted to. The next one is titled, Not Qualified for the Promotion, Then I'll Just Do My Job. A few years ago I worked for a furniture stored in the back store. My job consisted of unloading and loading trucks, assembling furniture and placing it on the main floor of the store. After around 6 months there, my supervisor announced he resigned, meaning his post was up for grabs. I had all the technical requirements, so I applied, but they gave the job to another one of my colleague who had more experience, which was totally reasonable. After maybe 1 year, my then supervisor just stopped coming into work for no reason. He just decided he had enough and he just left, number 2 week notice or anything. So while the director tried to get to him, I took over the role of supervisor. I was the one with the most experience, which means that combined with my regular work, I was now the one telling people what to do, when, doing the schedule, and all the paperwork for the shipment. 3 weeks later my colleague was officially fired by my director. In those 3 weeks I kept doing the job of supervisor, and doing it pretty well, so I thought that the promotion would come to me, but my director did nothing. I went to see him, explained what I had been doing and asked if I got the promotion, to which he answered that I was not qualified, nor smart enough to do this job. After some thinking I just decided that if I was not smart enough to do the job, then I shouldn't do it. So I went back doing my regular job, and I also started looking for something else. 4 to 5 days after I stopped filling in, my director come see me in the back store, asking why the job isn't being done. After all, without me to organize it, nothing was getting out of the store to be delivered to the client. I just reminded him of our previous meeting and he told me, yeah, I remembered that. What I meant is you're not qualified to get the pay bonus for the job, you still have to do the job, you idiot. I have to admit I still wonder how he thought that would work. Still a bit dumbfounded, I just told him that if I wasn't going to get paid for it, I certainly won't do the job, and that considering we were already short staffed with my old supervisor gone, he should be a bit more polite. Apparently this was an unreasonable request, a total lack of respect to him and worthy of firing me. Yep, still don't get how that would fix anything, but hey, he's the boss. I packed everything and left, knowing that the back store, which needed 5 people to operate, was now down to 3, with the most experienced worker having a total of 4 months. It only took my boss one day to call me back and telling me maybe he went overboard and that perhaps we could arrange something for the promotion, to which I replied that I would not be coming back since I had a few interviews lined up. I hung up while he was still cussing at me. After a few months at my new job I heard some surprising news. The store had closed down after 2 other back store employees resigned. Gotta admit that it felt good to see my old boss finally get what he deserved. The next one is titled, 30 Pairs of Underwear. I remember a lot of stories from my childhood. For context, my parents are what many define as narcissistic. This is a rather funny example of what they would do on a daily basis. I had just finished watching a movie when my mum came in and asked me when the last time I did laundry was. I looked at her and said plainly, only about a week ago. I had a lot of clothes, so I didn't have to do laundry as often. She scoffed and said, what about your underwear? I'm sure you've been wearing the same pair for months. I tried not to laugh, and told her that I change my underwear every day. Oh sure. I know you don't have 30 pairs of underwear, she frowned at me. Actually, I do, I said. Then show me, she shouted back. I smiled as she left, and did exactly what she said. I got a small box, went into my closet and dresser, and began collecting every pair of underwear I could. After about 15 minutes or so of gathering underwear, I walked out of my room to her and thrust the box in front of her. "What is this?" she demanded to know. 30 pairs of underwear, just like you asked, I smiled at her. She gave me an icy glare, and started counting them out one by one. "This is only 29, she said when she was done. "Oh, my bad," I smiled, and dropped my pants, showing off a bright yellow pair of underwear. She never bothered me about laundry after that. The next one is titled, "Want me to start as a new employee for our parent company? Okay, I'll use the new employee notice period to leave." Happened to me about 3 years ago now. I was working as a software developer for a smallish company owned by venture capitalists. I'd been there for just over a year and a half. The work was difficult due to losing staff and generally sloppy code base that was originally outsourced to a company on the other side of the world that we couldn't contact or generally understand their logic. My notice period was 3 months, pretty standard for a company this size for my role. A rival decides we're small enough to purchase our company just to get their hands on our bespoke software. They go ahead and after a few weeks have acquired our company and are formally introduced as the new owners. Everyone is a bit uneasy due to the change but are reassured that it will be at least 6 months before any changes are made. Our department is pretty happy with that. We're 3 developers, 2 business intelligence analysts, 1 tester and 1 systems architecture engineer, all reporting to the CTO. No one expects anything bad until one day we're all called into a meeting together with the new owners announcing that they are looking to merge their IT department with ours, and downsize them whilst they go. Here in the UK there's an official term called being placed at risk of redundancy. Their IT department isn't too dissimilar to ours, 3 developers, 1 tester. We're all told that there are 3 positions available to the developers, 2 developer positions and 1 lead developer position. We are allowed to apply for all of them, one of them or none of them. All of us brush up our CVs, go through the interviews and have all been looking for jobs elsewhere. All of the developers at our company decide that we want either the lead role, or none at all, as unless we're getting the promotion none of us really want to work for the new owners anymore. Overall half the staff would be gone by the end of the month. After a week goes by we're invited back to find out our fate. At this point they decide that my 2 colleagues are being let go, paid their notice and sent home on gardening leave. I'm offered the lead role, with an unsatisfactory pay rise. I accept it and am given a document explaining the transition process. The new role is with the other company and starts the following Monday. There's a clause in the document saying I've got a 4-week period where both parties can decide it isn't working and leave on a week's notice. All seems fine and I'm mostly relieved to have a job. It starts to sink in that I'm going to end up dealing with the brunt of the development whilst also trying to teach the 2 developers kept on from the other company what the codebase was like. I decide that I'm going to look elsewhere and end up getting a better offer working closer to home. I walk into the office on the next Monday, ask to speak to my boss, the CTO. Hand him a letter informing him of my notice and that I'll be gone by the end of the week. He turns white as a ghost. All of the other developers from our company have already been paid off and their end of contracts processed. There was nothing they could do, they were out of developers that understood our code. The last one is titled, "You're Not Here to Think," ouch, but okay. About a decade ago, I was the new guy at the company. We have people fly in from all over the world to start putting gear together before leaving again for job sites. And one of the things I did in my earlier days was pick those people up from the airport, take them to their hotel after work, etc. I pick a guy up who's going to be my boss on an upcoming job. The airport is about an hour from our HQ and hotel if you take the highway and main roads. When I meet him at the airport, he makes a request that I follow the directions on this awesome new GPS app that he's got on his phone. Swears it finds the absolute fastest routes. I'm paid by the hour and I'm the new guy, so sure, no problem. It ends up taking almost 25% longer than the main roads would have, but I'm not bothered. The next day, I'm asked to take him to his hotel. It's a straight shot a few miles down the road, but the road is always stop and go at rush hour. I make a turn off the road almost immediately in order to take a route that I know is faster, and he starts giving me a gentle amount of grief about not listening to his magical GPS app. I get him to the hotel in great time, but he still just won't stop insisting that the main road, which we could see was backed up, would have been faster. Okay, fine. A couple days later, we drive a few hours to our primary job site. The trip is fine, I follow his magic app and we arrive without incident. It's the largest job I've done so far, and I admittedly stumbled with a little bit of it. Boss tries to give me a pep talk at the end of day 1, but fails miserably. One of the critiques he gave me is, "You're not here to think." There are engineers on the job, and there are techs. I'm just a tech, and I'm told I'm basically there to do the grunt work aspect and just listen to what people like him tell me to do. Pretty demoralizing lecture, honestly. But I take it to heart. Once the event is over, it's my job to take Boss Man back to the airport, which I'd like to remind you at this point is in the city I live in, and not where he's from. We're running a little later than I would prefer to, but he's the kind of guy who would rather get to the airport 15 minutes before his flight boards. And as always, we're using his GPS, which he is still raving about. I don't know if the dude's friend invented the app or something, but he's just seriously fawning over it. Well, we approach what I know is the exit to the airport, but the app says to stay on the highway and take the next exit in a mile or two. So I follow the app, having learned my lesson from the boss, and soon we're stopped dead in a tight, single-lane construction zone. Boss realizes this, and starts to panic. And then starts asking if I'm sure I took the right route. The exit I'd normally take for the airport was a little ways back, but the GPS said to keep going. You went past the exit for the airport? His voice is raised, but not shouting. I went past an exit for the airport, I calmly replied. I'm sure this one will get us there, but with the speed traffic is moving, I don't know if we'll make your flight. It's already a pretty tight connection. He shouted at me this time, what were you thinking? Since the car was stopped dead, I turned my head so I could meet his eyes, and very blankly said, I'm not here to think. If Uber had existed there at the time, I think he would have gotten out of the car with his bag and called for a ride. As it is, I spent the rest of the trip listening to him yell at some poor airline agent about getting his flight rebooked, since it was at this point that he wasn't going to get there in time. And the thing is, this really wasn't even malicious on my end, I was just too timid to rock the boat anymore, so I was doing things exactly as I was told. Not my fault that it bit him in the butt. Thanks for listening.